In writing this book about Trevor Howard, I had perhaps the greatest advantage that any biographer can have, in that I got to know my subject very well over the months, in fact it went into years, that we collaborated on it. And I had the opportunity to see him in all kinds of moods and in all sorts of situations. And one of the, if you like, enduring memories I have of Trevor is how unstar-like he was. He didn't have much time for the sort of rather preening sort of stars of that particular period. He didn't regard himself really as anything exceptional. He saw himself more as a journeyman than a craftsman. And he was completely without ego, which is very, very refreshing when you're in somebody's company for quite some time. I've been with actors, and sometimes I've been in a 2-hour conversation, a long, in-depth interview with a famous actor, and throughout that particular time, not once have they asked who I was, where I came from, anything about me at all. It seems that they were completely self-absorbed in their own careers and in their own personalities. Trevor wasn't like that. He wasn't the, if you like, the traditional actor who sort of swanned around feeling rather grand about himself. His friends weren't really amongst actors. His friends were sports people. He was devoted to cricket. And his best friends were really from the sporting world, not the acting world. I don't think he had much time for the sort of for that kind of existence, the lovey kind of world. It wasn't his existence at all. And there's a wonderful case where he went to David Niven's memorial service at St. Paul's, I think in Covent Garden. And on the way out, he said to his wife Helen, "For God's sake, don't give me a send-off like that," because he didn't want that sort of people standing up preaching great eulogies about his talent and his gift and how internationally, what an international celebrity he was. He wanted none of that at all. He was a simple man, and he was an honest man. And we would go sometimes at lunchtime when I was doing an interview with him, an all-day sort of session. About 1 o'clock, he'd be starting to flag a bit, and he'd feel like a drink. So I'd take him to his local pub, which is called The Gate in Arkley. And Trevor would march in, and he'd had his favourite seat, and he'd sit down, and he'd sit down with his beer and his chaser. And he just sat there, and people didn't bother him. They knew who he was. They left him alone. They gave him his space. And he would just sit there chatting about cricket or the weather or the last time he went to America or Marlon Brando, any kind of thing that came into his head. And if people came up to him, as they did on occasion, not everybody left him alone. There was always the inquisitive person who came into the bar and nudged their friend and said, "Hey, look what's over there." And they'd go over and go, always terribly courteous, always terribly polite. There's one classic example where somebody went up to him, not while I was with him. Somebody went up to him and said, "I'm a great admirer of yours." And Trevor said, "Oh, I'm glad to hear it." And they said, "Yes, you were marvellous in that Cruel Sea film. You really did look like the submarine, the sort of corvette commander." And Trevor said, "Oh, that's awfully kind of you to say that." Not bothering to point out, in fact, that it wasn't him, but it was Jack Hawkins that his new admirer was talking about. And it was so typical of Trevor not to sort of put anybody down. You could have said, much. We could have been very curt and say, "Oh, sorry, old chap, that wasn't me." But no, he just let it pass. He said, "That's awfully kind of you. Thank you very much indeed." And to this day, I suppose the guy thinks that he was talking to Jack Hawkins.